Hello, welcome to Hazel Jane Tarot, or welcome back. Today I have a tarot deck review for you, and this is the Anna K Tarot. So this deck is published by Lewellyn, and it is not a new deck. It says in the book that the independent edition by Anna K was first published in 2008, and then this Lewellyn edition first came out in 2013. I think this is the third printing from 2019 that I have, but I'm not sure if there's much difference between them. I do know that this deck is also available from Anna K, the creator, directly, and there's a slightly different edition with different coloured borders, and it comes with a differently formatted book and box and so on. I do not have that one. I only have this mass market edition. I bought this last year mainly because it's sort of, it's not a classic deck, like the Morgan Greer or the Aquaria, those sort of older, more vintage decks, but it seems to be one that's quite, I've seen it around a lot, and I wanted to get it and have a go with it. So I used it in January of 2021, and I'm going to have to show it to you now. So it comes in this odd box. It's quite like a flimsy box. It's not hard. You can see like it bends. It's not hard the way some of the other tarot boxes are, and I, as a result, don't keep it in the box. I don't find this a very handy box design to use. So this is one of the boxes that ends up down the back of my sofa. And the little book, so the book fits in there. I quite like the size and formatting of the guidebook. And I actually read the whole guidebook, which is quite unusual for me. I did sit and read through the entire guidebook. And, it just has black and white images, and has like a little bit of description, and for the major arcana, or for some of the cards, there's room to sort of journal about the cards in here. I don't think there was anything particularly groundbreaking or that changed how I saw the tarot in this guidebook, but it's a good solid little guidebook, but it's not one I refer to regularly, so it just lives in the box behind the sofa. But yes, nice colourful box, and if you wanted to have it on your bookcase, it has quite a nice spine, and looks fine. So the actual deck itself, these are the backs of the version that I have, this mass market edition, and I quite like this. It looks a little bit like the wheel in the Gaian Tarot, and you have the sort of the four, I guess it's maybe the four seasons, but it's all the one colour, and the different phases of the moon depicted. And yeah, I like it. I like the backs. They're reversible. One maybe very small quibble is that the borders are black, but the back is not quite black. So I haven't edged this deck yet, partly because I think I would edge it in black because of the black borders, but I don't know if that would tone in with the back. It might look a bit strange, so I haven't done that yet. As you can see, I actually went for this edition rather than the independent edition because of the black borders. I quite like the borders to be consistent, the same colour for the whole deck, and the independent edition, I believe, has different colours for the different suits, which I'm not so keen on, just personal preference. You can see there is a little bit of, they're a bit dinged up at the edges from shuffling. The cardstock is quite glossy. You can see there when I tilt it towards the light, they're quite glossy, but not so glossy that I can't take a photograph of them, or you can see there with the camera just pointing down at them, they look absolutely fine. So I don't have much of a problem with the gloss. One of the things that I do like about a glossy finish like this is that they fan really beautifully. So I really appreciated this last year when I had broken my right hand and I wasn't able to shuffle, because I could fan them out with my left hand and choose a card, and that was really nice. So yes, I do like the being able to fan them out nicely, and you can page through them and look at them really easily because they're slippery with the gloss finish. The cardstock is fairly thin, you know, they're quite bendy. So if you like to riffle shuffle, if you can riffle shuffle this deck, probably riffle shuffle's fine. It's just a little bit wider than a standard tarot card, but the height is about the same as a standard tarot card. So I'm going to have a flip through the majors, and then I'm going to show you the courts and some of the cards that I liked and disliked in this deck, in the minors. There's this deck, the artist is Austrian, and what you'll see in the people depicted in this deck is it's kind of quirky, and they very much look like, to me, characters in a Northern European fairy tale. You know, that sort of has that sort of vibe. Some of the major Arcana cards pair really nicely together, so you can see there the Magician and the High Priestess. I do really love that High Priestess, you know, the water and the phases of the moon and everything. The dominant colours in this deck are really blue and yellow. There is a lot of yellow. So there you can see, and I like the way these pair together. The Emperor is in the very structured indoor setting with the checked tiled floor. And here we see the same checked tiled floor, but it's all broken up and we're outdoors, and you know, so that sort of contrast between the Empress and the Emperor I really enjoy. One of the cards I don't like, though, specifically in this deck is the Empress, and it's partly because of the face here. It's like she doesn't have a nose. So that's just something to do with the way that figure is drawn. And she looks a bit grumpy, which is not so much what I'm used to for the Empress. So that part of this image I'm not so keen on, but the contrast in terms of setting between those two I do really like. So the High Priest. What you find, and people talk about in this deck, is that it's very, very similar to the Rider-Waite-Smith, but Anna Kay has removed all of the kind of esoteric symbolism from the cards. So what you get instead is that sort of storybook narrative feeling without the symbolism. So here, one of the things I like in this card is with the lovers, we have an older couple, which is kind of nice to see. The wee dog. And where most of the cards have kind of a real world feel to them, you know, like as a storybook, but, you know, recognizably real people. Here we have, you know, sort of the chariot of the sun, you know, carrying the sun across the sky idea, which is a little bit different and more magical than some of the other cards. Justice, the Hermit, the Wheel of Fortune. I like this image. So we have the wheel is being turned by an unseen hand, and it has that, you know, the same atmosphere that you get in the Morgan Greer tarot with, you know, somebody at the top of the wheel and somebody falling off, somebody climbing up, but being turned by this invisible person. I quite like that. And the use of the blue and yellow, which dominate through the whole deck, you know, so that card ties in really nicely with the feel of the deck overall. I forgot to mention when we saw Justice that Justice and Strength are at 8 and 11, which makes no difference whatsoever to me in how I read this deck. It's not, it doesn't seem to, you know, you could just swap them around. It doesn't really seem to make much of a difference. So we have the Hanged Man. Look at his grumpy face. So he's not so much like at peace and enjoying his new perspective. This does seem to be more somebody being punished. Death, of an oddly inviting death character with a hand out to beckon you forward. Temperance. This is one of the cards I'm maybe not so keen on. I like in Temperance the mixing and the alchemy of the water and the cups being combined in that symbolism. So here we have like the balance idea being represented. It is quite a peaceful image, but I think by removing some of that symbolism, we've lost a bit here in the Temperance card. Like, I don't hate it, but it's not my favourite. Devil. There's quite the party going on in that card. The Tower. And I really like these three cards together. We have the Star, the moon and the sun. And as you can see, very simplified images without people in them. But if you know the tarot, I think they communicate their card meaning perfectly well. You've got the scene without the people in it. Then we have Judgement, and I really like this Judgement card, where we have the people coming up from the cave, and the angel kind of beckoning or welcoming them into the next level. It really illustrates for me that idea in the Judgement card of, hearing a call, being moving up a level in your life in some way, transitioning from one phase to the next, seeing beyond the boundaries of where you have been up until now. I think that's captured really well, and I really like that. That's one of my favorite cards in this deck. And then for the World, then we have an image that's reminiscent of the back design. Okay, so those are the major arcana. And as you can see, no major departures from what you might be familiar with other decks. Then the court cards, again, much like, as I was saying, it does have this feel of being like a Northern European fairy tale illustrations. So maybe part of why I get that vibe from it is all of the characters are white in this deck. We do get some diversity of ages, as I showed you before, but it's not particularly a deck depicting modern life, contemporary society. It's not a particularly diverse deck in many ways, so it's just sort of has that, as I say, kind of Northern European fairy tale vibe to it. So here we have the Page of Cups, the Knight of Cups, the Queen of Cups, the King of Cups, and as you can see, the only female is the Queen, and the rest are all kind of quite traditionally depicted. And then we have our rods. And what you can see straight away is a really different colour scheme. And that's something that I like in this deck, that we have a consistency in background colour and even clothing colour, the costumes of the characters within a suit. And I feel like the way the positions of these characters, sort of dynamic energy of these characters, reflects how I understand these suits. So I can read these court cards quite happily. And then we have swords. Probably the only one here that I'm not so keen on is the Knight of Swords. It's very like the Morgan Greer. I would be interested. I think this creator maybe was influenced by the Morgan Greer, because this kind of angry knight with a sort of fire in the background and so on has that aggression that you see in that deck, as in the Morgan Greer deck as well. And then into the Pentacles. And again, we're back to this yellow tones for the Pentacles. The Queen of Pentacles here seems to be depicted as pregnant, or maybe it's just the hand on the belly that makes me think that. But certainly this idea of fecundity and abundance and everything that maybe we would traditionally associate more with the Empress seems to be being brought through here in the Queen of Pentacles. So those are the court cards, and I think they work pretty well. Like, even if you look at all the pages together, they're all these young males, but though there's a similarity to them. It's sort of the vision of the deck, or it sort of harmonizes across the suits, which I think works pretty well. So then moving into the minor arcana, I'm not going to flick through them all. I'm just going to show you a few interesting cards in this deck, particularly standout ones. And this Eight of Swords, I know I've heard other people saying, and for me it was a factor as well, is one of the reasons that I got this deck, one of the cards that really appealed to me. For a lot of people, I think, who have this deck, it's one of their favourite Eight of Swords depictions. And it really communicates that. So there's, your more traditional Eight of Swords image of the girl who's bound and surrounded by swords in a gloomy landscape. But here, with the addition of the mirror and the woman looking into the mirror, you can see that that is not her reality. It is in her mind. And that aspect of the swords being of the mind, and the idea of being trapped in your own anxieties or thoughts or distorted self concept and so on. I think that comes across really well. Another deck, or another card in this deck that has a slightly different interpretation, is the Ten of Swords. It's almost like the 10.5 of swords. So the image that we might be used to seeing of the person prone on the ground and their body stabbed through with swords, that, you know, from the Rider-Waite-Smith. Here the person has got up and walked away. It's maybe reminiscent a little bit of the much later created Lightseers Tarot, which again shows this, focuses more on the healing after the damage from the Ten of Swords. So we have this idea of the ending, and it's been bloody and it's been tough, but you have lived to tell the tale and go, are moving on to the next cycle. So some people might not like that, because it is, as I say, it's like 10.5. It's moving beyond the Ten of Swords a little bit, but I quite like that interpretation. Another card in the deck that I enjoy is this Nine of Cups. I think it's just such a jolly, celebratory picture. And maybe it does, again, this storybook thing, you know, it's like it's maybe like the wedding at the end of the fairy tale or something like that. Or it reminds me of, you know, the scene in Titanic where Jack and Rose are dancing at the Keeley down in the third class, you know, just full of energy and fun. And maybe at the time of filming this, we're still in COVID lockdown in Northern Ireland, and this type of environment, a party, is very far away from our current reality. And maybe I like it a little bit because I really would quite like to go to a party like that at the minute. I miss those types of events. Another one I quite enjoy is the Seven of Cups. I think the way the cups are sort of seem to be made from air, floating in the air, and the way she's positioned, it really brings out that idea of illusion and maybe putting your focus and your faith in something unreal in the Seven of Cups. And another one I quite like is this Six of Swords, because we have, you know, the tempestuous water here, and they're moving into smoother water, and the characters are a little bit more ambiguous than you might traditionally find. Like, I know Kenneth in a Common Hawthorne, he talks about the Six of Swords as one of the cards that he looks at when he's looking at, do I see myself in tarot? If you've not watched his series, it's really great. You know, that normally the depiction, we seem to have a man with a woman, you know, kind of steering the boat with a woman and child sort of being rescued or brought somewhere. And here I think that's a little bit more ambiguous who these characters are. And maybe that I kind of like that about this card. Okay, so a couple of cards that I'm maybe not so keen on or don't make as much sense to me. We have a really brutal Five of Swords in this deck. That idea of, you know, defeating your enemies and you know, were you in the right? That's kind of ambiguously portrayed in the Rider-Waite-Smith, you know, where you could maybe identify with the defeated people, you could identify with the sly facial expression of the person who seems to have won, and so on. Here we just have, you know, women and children being butchered. It's, you know, fire and blood. It's really quite full on. And so when it comes up in a reading, you know, it does give you a bit of a, oh dear, that's not going to be a good day. So I don't hate that. I just think it's interesting and maybe makes me laugh a little bit because it is so over the top compared to what I'm used to. In the Eight of Rods, instead of having the rods flying through the air that you might be used to, we have the very explicit idea of a message, which is a bit different. And this Two of Swords, I must confess, I just don't really get. There, you know, there's a lot of symbolic elements here, and it almost reminds me of the mystical healing reading cards, the colours and so on, and the sort of abstract weirdness of it. You know, we have this very formally dressed, you know, fairy tale type character walking away from something. We have an exit that's blocked with these swords, the sand coming in from the beach, the waves. It looks like this building could be on the verge of crumbling down. What any of that has with the ideas of using your intuition, listening, making a decision, being trapped in paralysis maybe in your brain, you know, ideas that I might traditionally associate with the Two of Swords. I have no idea how that connects with that, and I don't think the book helped me that much either. So that's one of the cards of this deck that I'm just not so keen on. I'm just going to show you a few more of the minors, and just so you can see how they look when you lay them out, and where I get that sort of storybook feel. It is quite narrative. You know, if you were using tarot for creative writing prompts or just for fun, you know, to tell stories, or with younger people, like maybe with children, to pull some cards and say, what do you think's happening here? You know, you could create a story, a little storyboard from these cards very easily. And as you can see, again, the blues and yellows are very dominant. One of the reasons I chose this deck to work with in January this year was because it just has a wintry feel to it. Even with so much yellow, there's a paleness to the yellow, like a watery winter sunshine paleness. And it just felt like a January winter kind of a deck. I maybe find it a little bleak sometimes, and I eventually stopped. After a few weeks, I decided to move on to something a little warmer, shall we say. But I do enjoy this deck. I think it is quite unique. The quirky faces and facial expressions on the characters, you know, it's maybe a love them or hate them kind of thing. I really quite enjoyed them. I think it very much got its own character. It's a straightforward, easy to work with, easy to read deck. And I think for somebody who is maybe beginning with tarot and who's maybe, like, you know, could be put off by or intimidated by all the esoteric symbolism that you might get in some decks, this deck is really quite accessible in that way. And the book, as I say, it was, you know, a good straightforward tarot book with you know, the meanings of the cards quite clearly explained and so on. So as a mass market, easily available deck, definitely not a bad one for a beginner in tarot to have a go with. I have ended up showing you all the minors, but obviously not in order. So yes, this is a deck I am going to keep. You can see, actually, looking, you know, as I'm putting it back, the glossy cardstock does smudge a bit with your fingers, but that's not something that worries me terribly. But yes, it is a deck I'm going to hold on to. Is it a deck I'm going to use often? I don't know. I think it's one of those ones that might be as and when the mood strikes, you know. But if you have the Anna K, if you've worked with it, I would love to hear your comments below. Do you agree with my take on the deck, or do you use it for specific things or at specific times of year? I would love to hear how you work with it below. Or if, you know, you've looked at this and you're thinking, oh no, this definitely would not be a deck for me. Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear it in the comments. I'd love to have a chat with you about it. So look, thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back again soon with some more tarot goodness. If you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you hit the subscribe button and come back and see me again. Bye.